Hello and welcome to the Keep Right On podcast. I'm Alex Dicken and I'm joined by my partner, co-host and definitely friend, Brian Dick. We're going to be dissecting the game against Rotherham at the weekend. A bit of a drab draw for Blues. Looking at those Wayne Rooney comments in that now famous press conference, infamous press conference. A whole range of other things, addressing your questions and takes, and looking ahead to the game against Coventry on Friday, where hopefully Blues will get back to winning ways. Brian, firstly, on the game against Rotherham, get your take on it first. Firstly, it wasn't pretty, was it? It was a bit of a hard watch.
Yeah, it was a hard watch. I actually thought Blues started okay. They got in behind a couple of times really quite early on, didn't they? And Ollie Burke got into a great position just on the byline to the right. And I actually thought, Blues are in the ascendancy here. Ethan Laird was getting forward. Dembele was starting to pop up a little bit on the left. And I thought you could see Rotherham sitting in. And I thought, right, this is going to be one of those games where the pitch tilts up. The pressure's going to be so intense. But once that breakthrough didn't come, and obviously the Laird going off injured, I think Blues lost their way a little bit, and Rotherham had more and more belief that they could get something from the game, albeit they were arriving with a dire away record. And by the end of the match, you'd probably say that Rotherham certainly had the better chances. They hit the bar, didn't they? And then there's that goal line clearance from Sanderson. By the end of the match, you're probably saying, well, yeah, Blues have not done well. That's the wrong word. Blues should be grateful for their point there, because I think Rotherham I think Rotherham were on top for way longer than Blues were, don't you?
Yeah, I agree. I made the mistake yesterday, actually, of watching the game back on the extended highlights. And in 7 minutes of footage, bearing in mind this is on Blues' own YouTube channel, you think it'd be a little bit favourable. It was pretty much just Rotherham attack after attack after attack. The only chance of note, if it was a chance of note Blues had in that game, was the great bit of skill by Dembele out on the left wing and the cross to Cody Drum out at the back post, and he forced a decent save. It fell to Djukovic and he blazed over. Other than that, it was kind of Blues just making mistakes and gifting Rotherham chances, wasn't it? The playing out from the back was a major issue in that game. I'm sure we'll come on to that throughout this podcast. But the Emmanuel Ivu back pass to Ruddy that let in Rathbone, and I'm not sure that it was Sanderson's shoulder, hand, arm, but Blues got away with one there. Either way you look at it. And it was probably, if we look at the progress Blues have made under Rooney since those first two games, which were pretty bad against Middlesbrough and Hull, we've seen little glimpses in each of the games. Whereas against Rotherham, I'd probably say it kind of was back to that at the start, where Blues weren't creating a great deal and they were very fortunate they didn't concede against, on paper, a very bad Championship team.
On paper, yes, you looked at their squad and you thought, Blues are man for man way better, and you wouldn't necessarily have chosen any of the Rotherham players, maybe Sam Nombe potentially, or Johansson in goal as anyone that would particularly trouble the Blues 11. But as it turned out, it looked like managerless Rotherham were the ones with the sort of the plan and the idea of what they were trying to do. That's not to say Rooneys didn't send them out with a plan. Of course he did, and we'll come on to the press conference. And I think he spoke a little bit about the plan and how the plans have changed. But whatever the plan was, it didn't feel like the players were implementing it at all.
Yeah, well, we might as well talk about it now. I mean, the main issue in the game was the playing out from the back, wasn't it? And that Blues kept playing themselves in trouble. The amount of times Ivu and Ruddy, gifted possession away in the final third was pretty shocking. I asked Rooney about this in the post-match press conference, and he basically said that that's not kind of what they'd been instructed to do. That they'd been working in training on playing higher up in the opponent's half, rather than taking risk at the back, which we saw in those early games. Because after the game against Hull, if we remember, he said that they would adapt and they would stop doing that. And we have seen that they haven't taken as many risks at the back in recent weeks, and obviously they've not been gifting as many goals away in some of those games. But it was kind of, as I said earlier, a bit back to the start where they were taking risks and giving the ball away. And Rooney admitted himself, they're not comfortable doing that. They haven't got the players for that at the moment. Whether Dion Sanderson, Emmanuel Ivu, John Ruddy can become those players that can play out from the back, that's going to be a thing over time. But at the moment, they can't do it, as their manager has said.
Yeah, I thought actually that you, me, and the other journalists in the room missed a little bit of a trick in that press conference, because it didn't really filter in what the sentiment behind Rooney's comments are. If he's telling the players to not do that and then they go and do it, it's there's clearly a disconnect there, isn't there? And I think, had I been more alert, the next question would be, so Wayne, are the players not doing what you're asking them to do? Wouldn't it? But it wasn't just, it's not just one person that decides to play out from the back, is it? Ruddy lines up a free kick, then Ivu and Sanderson split either side of him, either side of him, and it goes from there. Surely, if that's not what they're being asked to do, then one of them should be saying, "Hang on, this isn't the setup, or this isn't our exit strategy, or whatever." Or am I misinterpreting that a little bit? I don't know.
No, I think it's hard. It's hard actually. We should have probably followed up a little bit, but the impression I got was that they are playing out from the back, because we keep seeing the two centre backs split, don't we, to the edge of the 6-yard box either side, and Ruddy goes out to one or the other. But I think it's basically the key point he's trying to make. Rooney is trying to make is about game management and knowing when to play out from the back. Right. Because early on it was like against Hull, for example, it was play out from the back constantly, and they were getting caught, weren't they? And it happened against Middlesbrough as well. And I think the change that Rooney has tried to make is that they are more sensible in playing out from the back. It's not at every opportunity, because we know that John Ruddy is not a goalkeeper like Ryan Allsop for Hull, for example, who literally is taking the ball on his own goal line and taking on 2 or 3 Blues players and spreading passes through the middle of play. I think it's just about sensible decision making, and that was the point he was trying to get across. And they just kind of, on Saturday, it felt like they were trying to play out every single opportunity, and it wasn't working. They're clearly not comfortable enough doing that yet, as we found out in those early weeks before Rooney admitted that was wrong and decided to change things slightly.
And then you've got how much they're being asked to play it for the back. They're presumably, from what you're saying there, then they're being asked to make a judgment call as to whether this goal kick is the one to try to do it with. Whatever the judgment call was made, or the rights and wrongs of the incident that led to Sanderson saving on the line. In no coaching manual, in no set of match instructions is underhit the ball to your goalkeeper a point that you want, a route that you want to go down. Is it the execution there was really, really bad? A, whether they should be doing it, or B, maybe they shouldn't be doing it. But then if they are, they've got to do it better than that. And you made reference to the Sanderson clearance on the line. 2 sort of things that I think about that is, firstly, I'm not sure it was a penalty, because there certainly weren't that many protests from the Rotherham players, and I've not seen it back. Still not seen it back. I don't know if the highlights clarify it at all. And secondly, Sanderson's coming in for quite a bit of criticism, as you know, as maybe one of the players who's been underperforming since Rooney's arrival. I don't think you can question his commitment on that in that particular incident. I thought it was an inspired piece of defending that saved his team a point.
Yeah, I feel a little bit sorry for Sanderson. I don't think he can question his commitment at all, to be honest. I think the main problem he has found, and I think he is the player who's been most unsettled under Rooney, who has looked most unsettled. I think there's been probably the biggest drop off in his performances from before till after, because the changes have been enormous. The centre backs have been asked to play quite a different way. They've been far more exposed. Sanderson is now no longer, when he looks to his right or his left, has got a fullback within close quarters who is there to protect him. He's not got the two defensive midfielders in front of him. It's a very different way of playing. Add into that, Kevin Long, who was instrumental in that partnership early on, is now no longer in the team. And it's Emmanuel Ivor, who, to be fair, he's young, he's inexperienced, he's learning, but he has been quite erratic in some of his performances. And Sanderson has had to bail him out on more than one occasion. Another change that's been made, Ivor initially played on the left side. Sanderson is now being asked to play on the left side because Ivor hasn't been comfortable on the left side. So that's, there's three changes right there, three big changes in terms of what you're asking Dion Sanderson to do. And I think, we can look at the opening 11 games of this season where Sanderson, pound for pound, consistency-wise, is probably the most consistent player and best Blues player. We talked the other day and said, if you look at maybe 5 or 6 of those games, Sanderson was probably man of the match or a contender for man of the match. You think back to his performance away at Bristol City against Leeds. Against Leeds, he was absolutely tremendous. He was leading by example. He's a top championship defender. And at the moment, Wayne Rooney isn't getting the best out of him. Whether, we're going to come on to those comments later, and we don't know if they're directed at Sanderson. We don't know which players they were directed at. But, now I suppose the acid test for players like Sanderson and the more experienced in terms of game time players in that dressing room is how they react to those comments and whether they can deliver this new brand of football that Wayne Rooney wants at Birmingham City.
Yeah, indeed. Just before we get to we keep promising the juicy bit, don't we? Just before we get to comments about certain body parts that Rooney made about his players, he also spoke about Jordan James, didn't he? And one of our contributors, actually, I can't remember who it was, forgive me, last week mentioned it or asked us, is Jordan James the sort of the crucial player into Rooney in Rooney's revolution? And it certainly looked like that, didn't he? Just to identify one positive from the weekend, Jordan James came off the bench, and in 25 minutes, I thought, did he take the game by the scruff of the neck? That might be gilding the lily a little bit, but he certainly showed a lot of leadership, a lot of purpose, and fairly clear. I thought a lot of clarity about what he was trying to achieve. And Rooney spoke about James in his post-match press conference, didn't he? We just remind everyone what he said, please.
Yeah, so he basically poured as much praise on James as you did there, Brian, and said that he was really impressed with him after he came on and promised him a start against Coventry on Friday. I think in hindsight, it's probably the wrong call not to start James against Rotherham after his performance against Blackburn. I think he gives far more to the Rooney way of playing at the moment than Bacuna and Bielik do. And for me, as we've said in the previous podcast, I think James is the most important central midfielder to this system at the moment. Rooney did say that the 11 for the Rotherham game was chosen before the Blackburn game. Depending on injuries and things they picked up, and that obviously they didn't change that. But James has to start at the moment. He's very important. He's probably the one player who is really getting the Rooney way of playing, I'd say. Yeah.
JJ played 85 minutes, didn't he, at Blackburn? So it is kind of understandable because we're in a situation where central midfield is probably one of the places where there are enough bodies to make changes, and you don't, you just can't flog the same players over and over again, particularly with what's lying ahead in the next few weeks.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. JJ is the sort of the poster boy for what Rooney's achieved, if that's the right word so far. And yes, he'll start at Coventry, which we'll come on to in a bit. And here we are. We arrive at the point where Wayne Rooney was sat in a press conference. We were asking him questions. For those people who sort of may not know the sort of the inner workings of a press conference, Alex, you tend to ask questions first, then the other sort of newspapers or media outlets will ask their questions, and then I think it's unusual. There was a sort of a little sidebar to the press conference towards the end where questions were asked for the responses and the quotes to be used on Sunday night or Monday morning, and it was during this section that Rooney was pressed about his players, why his players were playing the way they were, and I don't know if we can even use the phrase. I mean, I know he said it in a press conference, but basically he accused them of lacking a certain body part, lacking courage, didn't he? And that has prompted a huge amount of discussion on social media from Blues fans.
Yeah, I think the point he was making, I think, was about players performing in training and then not having the courage to take their performance in training into a match day. And yeah, I mean, we obviously don't need to repeat it. Everyone knows what it is now. I think you probably can say that in a podcast, Brian. You probably can, but anyway.
That's your my surname. Ship's already sailed, isn't it?
And mine as well. So yeah, it was a strong line to go down, I think, in the press conference. Certainly, I mean, when the press conference was over and we were kind of in a little debrief, we were both a little bit open mouthed and kind of like, oh, whoa, that's a kind of, it's a big line, isn't it? You don't often hear managers kind of, especially 8 games into a tenure, you don't hear managers, say things like that. There's two reasons that I think Wayne Rooney says that comment. One is that he feels invincible. He feels like he's going to get this chance under the current owners. He feels secure in his position, and that he's going to outlast some of the players that he's going to want to get rid of, that aren't going to fit his style of play. And the other reason is that he wants a big reaction, and that he's really testing the waters. It's new to us, I suppose, or new to me on the Birmingham City scene, because that's something that John Hughes would never have done. Very, very different in terms of kind of how they talk and how they address those situations. I'm not saying either is right or wrong. They're just different styles of management. We've seen successful managers do what John Hughes would do, and we've seen successful managers do what Wayne Rooney would have done. Like, for example, Jose Mourinho is probably a manager who might have gone down a similar route, and he has won everything in the game. So it's probably not for us to judge in that regard, but it certainly probably took us back a little bit. It was a bad performance, and he was clearly quite frustrated and angry about it. So, but we must also say that he delivered all these comments and all these, in quite a really, really composed manner. I think that is something I've taken from all his press conferences so far, and that how calm and composed he is. And I think that comes across on the touchline as well. He's not, constantly ranting and raving. He's very relaxed, and you know when he's annoyed, and when he's frustrated, as he has been a number of times so far, and as he was in the press conference on Saturday. But he delivers it in a very relaxed manner. And he said himself, he's completely different to how he was when he was a player as a manager now.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I felt there was a tension or an agitation coming off him as he was answering his questions. Now, he was relaxed and he was smiling. He even cracked a couple of jokes about being a nice guy, didn't he? He wasn't agitated. It's wrong of me to say that he was agitated, but there was something emanating, wasn't there? There was a dissatisfaction emanating from him, I felt, in his answers. Presumably, he'd rather been anywhere else in the world than talking to us about that display, which probably accounts for much of his dissatisfaction. But yeah, I did feel a little bit of an undertone off him. That said, I was surprised with his choice of language. And you are right. I don't think we can say at this stage whether it was a mistake or not, because the reason that he's done it is to try and extract a reaction. If you are a professional sports person, professional sportsman in this instance, he's been quite specific about the gender, hasn't he? and you are having your sort of courage and your manhood almost questioned, then the ball is in your court. Use that phrase. The ball is in your court to respond, isn't it? You know, he's absolutely wanting a response. You know, I don't know that bravery necessarily means throwing yourself into tackles. I think it's about what you do with the ball, in the way that JJ came onto the pitch and was brave. He took it in difficult, tight spots. He carried it forward and he passed it forward. And I think that's probably what Rooney wants to see from other midfielders. I can't say I saw Bielik do that a huge amount, you know, without picking on individuals. I think Ethan Laird carried it forward and passed it forward. Buchanan did to an extent, not massively. Bacuna, it was an erratic performance from Bacuna, wasn't it? I thought Dembele showed good courage, I have to say. I thought, you know, he went at his man. He was quite effective, and to the point where let's get it to Dembele and see what we can create. Seemed to be the only kind of strategy. It was on the other ring. Mayoshi, I thought Mayoshi was muted a little bit. Did you?
Yeah, no, I'd agree.
There is plenty of room for these players to say, you know, you said what you said. I'm going to show you, and that. I think that is probably the, you know, it's not about, I don't think it was delivered with deflecting blame from Rooney or Rooney trying to wheedle out of something by pinning a failing on his players. I think it was said with design.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think part of it stems from, you know, this is a guy who, yes, is a player, but he was massively successful at Man United and also with England as well. You know, top scorer for both of those while he was playing. Won God knows how many Premier League titles, League Cups, FA Cups, won the Champions League. You know, as a manager, his record is not great. At Birmingham City, his record is pretty bad. Like 1 win, 2 draws, 5 defeats from 8 games. He's not, you know, used to that. And maybe that's just him coming out fighting a bit angry and wants to kind of get a point across that way. I want to actually talk about the kind of the Rooney reign so far. I know you hate me using reign in that context, but but
he's not king.
No. Yeah, let's not go on to the monarchy, Brian. I wanted to ask, because we spoke about JJ earlier. How many players do you think have actually improved under him? That's the big question I've got. As a coach, he keeps saying, you know, that it's his job to improve the players. And he mentioned it in the press conference, actually, not long after he made that comment. I think that, you know, he's got to improve the players. When we're talking about transfers and things like that, you know, got to improve the players they have. You know, how many players have actually improved? Because at the moment, it just looks like kind of a lot of them, apart from JJ, have gone within themselves.
Yeah, I'm struggling to find someone who you would say, yes, JJ, yes, they are playing better now than they were when Eustace was there. Ethan Laird didn't look too affected by it, I didn't think, albeit he's potentially out now. You know, I think Dembele. I will say Dembele. Is he improved? I would say Dembele has recovered from his initial blip under Rooney. I thought Dembele was really quite good on against Rotherham.
I think he's got it, hasn't he, Dembele?
I think he has. Yeah, the penny's dropped. That's the right way to put it. Yeah, you know, you have to marry up the whatever you're doing in attack with your defensive responsibilities. And there were a couple of times when Rotherham were breaking from Blues corners, and it was Dembele that broke up the play. So yeah, you threw me James, I'll throw you back Dembele. Is there a third one to throw into the mix?
I think that there's 2 players that have been probably unaffected by it, and you mentioned Laird. I'd say Buchanan, based on the Sheffield Wednesday game, based on that he was probably the best defender against Blackburn. I think Lee Buchanan's a consistent 7 out of 10 every week, isn't he? So I don't think he's looked massively affected by it yet. Those 2, the 2 fullbacks. I think Cody Dramé as well. Cody Dramé, we keep, you know, I don't think he played that well against Rotherham, don't get me wrong, but I think over the course of Rooney's games, I actually think Cody Dramé has been fine. It's the rest of the players, especially going forward. You know, Stansfield looked quite good early on. Bacuna looked quite good. Burke had his moments, but Burke's completely tailed off. but yeah, I think maybe those two have been not unaffected, and the two we mentioned, Dembele and James, are now thriving, I'd say. But other than that, then no.
What I would say about Bacuna is, I think the work ethic is there. I really do think he's trying. I don't know what his GPS stats are, but to the eye, it looks like he covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
Is he always defensively disciplined? No. But does it? Is that? I think that discipline's down to maybe concentration and maybe not being quite his normal game, rather than not being bothered. What really frustrates me with Bacuna at the moment is you can see he's covering the yards, but where you want him to be effective is in that final third. And there was a breakaway in the first half on Saturday. Blues had a 2-on-1. Mayosha carried the ball from a Rotherham corner up to the centre circle, and he played Bacuna and Stansfield. He played Bacuna in, and Bacuna had Stansfield to his right. Now, some of the passes and the assists that we've seen Juninho Bacuna play. Think back to Scott Hogan's hat trick against West Brom at the Hawthorns. Bacuna's distribution was absolutely magical that night. And then the pass he had to play to curl it round the back of the centre back and put Stansfield in on goal, and you'd have banked Stansfield to score that. He didn't just slightly overhit it; he overhit it by 6 or 7 yards. And I'm wondering now whether the fact he's having to cover so much ground is impacting his accuracy in the final third. And I think back to something Steve Cottrell said many years ago about Jack Magoma. Magoma was having a really good season, but the issue that Cottrell highlighted with Magoma was winning the ball effectively as an auxiliary left back, then having to run 40 yards to get into the attacking third, and then by the time he got there, he was either exhausted or the defence had covered back, and he wasn't in a position to play that decisive pass. And I'm wondering if there's a little bit of a shade of that with Bacuna. But I'm going to give Bacuna a pass on the buy-in and on the effort levels. I really am.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point you make. Moving on to questions, Brian, because I think there's been a general theme, to be fair, to a lot of the questions we've had, and thanks everyone for sending so many over in the last 24 hours or so. This is takes up a massive section, the questions and takes of our podcast. So without you, we'd be rambling our own thoughts and probably finished in 20 minutes. So we're going to start with Paul Drinkwater. My question is more around the public criticism of players. This can either inspire or, as many of us have seen over the years at various clubs, cause the manager to lose the dressing room. Which do you see as more likely? I hope inspire, by the way. Brian, kick us off.
I think it will depend on what's inside the player. I think some will be inspired by it. I think some will potentially, their heads might drop, and I think, this is uncomfortable for me. I don't fancy this. So difficult without knowing the players individually, and I have to say I don't know the players as people particularly. There's 2 or 3 that have been there a while, and you kind of get a feel for what characters they are. But will it inspire? I would hope it would inspire. If someone is questioning your ability to do your job, then you hopefully respond in a sort of an assertive and positive way. So I don't know. I don't know that we're going to know that, Alex. Really, I'm guessing a little bit. It's a good question, but I'd be guessing. We'll maybe know that in January, or at the other side of Christmas, potentially when the transfer window's open and when agents have had a chat with their players about how they're fancying it or they're not fancying it, we'll potentially start to see a bit of an answer to that.
Yeah, I think we're probably, like you say, probably going to see an answer in the next month or two. We'll probably see a bit of an answer on the field and a bit of an answer in terms of team selection as to who Rooney, seeing things that he likes from in training, because he hasn't, consistently picked that many players. There haven't been that many players, there's only been, I think, Sanderson who started every game so far as outfield players go. So no one, is completely, no one's completely got drawn him in yet by the looks of it. I think he's obviously, as I touched on earlier, I think he's probably made that comment so he can wheedle people out, and that he can kind of make decisions on them before we get to the January window. There's a month now. They're going to have 6 games where he's going to be able to kind of see how players respond to those comments and respond to what he said to them. So, I don't think we can. We're not the players. We're not inside their heads. We don't know how they're going to respond to it. We only know how, I suppose, as people, how we'd respond to that kind of thing. So we can't, as Brian said, can't answer that one categorically. But I think we'll see it on the pitch and in terms of in-team selections and what Rooney looks to do immediately in January. Just to add to that, Alex,
I felt in the last international break, just before the Sheffield Wednesday game, or was it? I felt that Rooney had got a point where he'd found the group of guys that he wanted to go to war with, and he made reference to during that international break to them having a game against the under-21s and 2 or 3 of players impressing in that and playing their way into his thinking and getting selected for the next game. It felt like he sort of got the guys, as I said, that that he wanted. He saw taking him and his team forward, and then obviously Rotherham felt a little bit of a backward step to that. We'll come on to team building not being a linear process in a minute, but that was an interesting question from Paul, and I think we will see it in the coming weeks. Robert Moore says, I feel like a lot of Rooney's criticism is aimed at Sanderson. Do you agree? I know he got on well with Eustace, and he was very much involved in re-signing him. Toys thrown out of the pram, perhaps. Go on, Alex. You can do that one.
I touched on this a little bit earlier. We don't know who Rooney was aiming, that particular comment at. He mentioned there are some players who have enough experience to do better. He absolved. The only player he did absolve from that comment was Lukas Djukovic. So it's open to interpretation. What I will say is what I said earlier about Sanderson. I don't think any Blues player has had kind of more disruption in the Rooney era in terms of, yes, he started every game, but he started next to a different partner. He's lost his rock next to him in Kevin Long. And then all of a sudden he's been asked to switch sides to the left rather than play on the right. And obviously at the same time trying to learn a new style of play that he would not have been used to because he's not played in a team that plays this way before. Do I think he's got the qualities to fit in? Yes, because he's got the speed that Rooney's going to need from the centre-backs. And I think he's probably better on the ball than a lot of us give him credit for. It's not always shown in the last 8 games or whatever, but I do think he's got the quality to fit in, and I can't comment whether it was aimed at him or not.
Yeah, what I would say about Sanderson is, he's played at Sunderland, he's played for Blues under Eustace, for Blues, I think under Bowyer as well. He has played at QPR. So, the point I'm making is that he's been around a little bit. He is quite experienced, and he has learned to fit into different systems and under different managers. So if it's uncomfortable at the moment, and if it is uncomfortable at the moment, then I'd back Sanderson to have the physical attributes to recover it once things start to stabilise.
Mm-hmm. One from Mick. Do you both think Rooney has done anywhere near enough to be trusted with the rebuild in transfer windows, especially this summer when it's such an important window with players out of contract? I'm really worried long term if we don't get that transfer window right.
So if we're talking in terms of Rooney's whole career, I feel in Derby, the results weren't great, but the situation was horrendous. I feel he probably did do quite well to patch a side together there. So certainly in the season that the sort of the half season that he had when he took over from, I think it was Koku he took over from. I think he cobbled something together there, which was good. The next season the next Derby season was just, it's so much of an outlier. I don't know that you can say that you can take anything from it really. I thought there was a coherence mostly to what Rooney's Derby were trying to do. I don't know enough about the DC United situation. I mean, it didn't go brilliantly well, did it? But then I think a guy you spoke to, Alex, said that at DC United, they weren't a lavishly financed franchise, were they?
Yeah, they're known as a thrifty club. So they don't spend much money in terms of MLS. I think I'd say on recruitment, if Rooney is to get the transfer windows, he's talking about the transfer windows like he's confident that he will get them.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't just need to be Wayne Rooney signing his players. I think it needs to be a combination of the club through the recruitment team and Craig Gardner as technical director and Gary Cook as CEO, identifying players for Wayne Rooney to sign that are going to benefit the club in the long term, irrespective of whether Wayne Rooney is the manager or not, because I think that's how most clubs work now. It's not just they don't really let the manager have full control of transfers because inevitably managers don't really last that long in this game. Most clubs work with a technical director or a director of football now, and Blues have one. So if we are obviously convinced that this is the way forward for Blues under United. They're determined that, and absolutely unwavering in their confidence that the way to get out of the Championship is to play this style of football. This free flowing out from the back style of football that is designed to have possession. You can recruit for that, as I'm sure they will. Those players, don't have to be 100% Wayne Rooney players. They could be 60% Wayne Rooney players and 40% club players that the club are happy to invest, a good contract in. I think that's the key. Because the annoying thing would be if Blues, let Wayne Rooney have a huge transfer window and give 10 players 4-year contracts, and then Blues, for example, if we're talking next season, started next season badly and decided this wasn't working and made the change then, and all of a sudden you've got a new manager coming in who like Wayne Rooney has found with some of the players Blues have now, might not want those players and has to change it again. I don't think that's the way you run a football club. I think you need to make decisions for the long term, sensible decisions. I think Blues made a fair few in the summer because I think they signed some players that they knew if they were going to transfer to this new style of football could fit in, the likes of Ethan Laird, Lee Buchanan. And I think they need to be sensible. They don't need to let one manager sign all their players. I think you need to have a balance. Yeah.
It's about recruiting to a type, isn't it? And and recruiting to a plan of what the team looks like, and having almost in an ideal world, you'd be in a Brentford scenario where Brentford probably know who their third next right back is, or Brighton or someone like that. They've got this footballing machine which works, and they spend their intervening, the recruitment staff go around the world looking for pieces that fit into that machine. I don't know that it's necessarily like you. I don't think it is about recruiting for Wayne Rooney and then recruiting for whoever succeeds Wayne Rooney and then recruiting for whoever succeeds the guy who succeeds Wayne Rooney. Yeah. We've really have been down there. Karanka got a ton of players. Lee Bowyer didn't get many. Harry Redknapp got loads of players. Zola got a few players. There has to be a single thread running through the entire organisation. And I do think Knighthead, and I do think Gary Cook, and I do think Craig Gardner understand that. Well, I'm sure they do, because they've said they understand it. So I'm with you on that one. Not necessarily a Rooney issue, particularly.
Yeah. I'm not sure. We'll come on to it now, Brian. One of the main questions I had when I put an appeal out yesterday was, how long do Knighthead and Gary Cook give it? If it doesn't get better, how long do they give it? I think we've probably addressed this a little bit before. The one thing I will add, if Wayne Rooney is not getting results in 3 months from now, and Blues are looking like they could be dragged into a relegation scrap, that's when I think there's probably chance that the owners could act. That's the way I see it, because I'm 100% convinced these owners will not want Birmingham City in League One. They've said, I think Tom Wagner said that he wouldn't have bought the club had it got relegated last season. That's on record. So they have no intention of going there. They obviously want Wayne Rooney as their manager, and they're going to give him every possible chance to succeed, which is fair enough. But that's how I see it. I think that's how I see it. Do you agree, Brian?
Yeah. How long do they give Wayne Rooney? Every last second that they possibly can. Yeah. I think they'll leave no stone unturned in supporting him. And do you know what? I think they're probably right to do that. We've been in the sack cycle for so many years. If you're going to try and introduce a new playing style and new ambition to a team, then they've gone down this route. We've discussed ad nauseum whether they should have gone down this route, and I think everyone knows my feelings on that. But now you're going down this route, you have to make it work, don't you? And that's not just about signing loads of players. That is about making changes that Rooney wants on the training field to the training facilities, which has happened. It's about beefing up the recruitment. It's about doing the research on the recruitment. It's about all the things, all the little bits of things that go on behind the scenes. It's about supporting Rooney on the medical side as well. There's so much else that they can do to enhance performance. So, yeah, I think they will, and I think they have to give it until the very last second, and hopefully it won't ever get to that very last second, and they can get to the summer with a semblance of stability, and then those big pre-pandemic contracts come off the books, and then we really are potentially cooking at that point.
Last one of the questions, Nick Morris. We have 6 games left of 2023. How many points do you two think we'll get? My opinion is 2, maybe 3 on current form, and if his slating of players continues. I've quickly scribbled down the fixtures. So Blues, before the end of this year, play Coventry, who are 17th, Cardiff, who are 11th, Leicester, who are top of the league, Plymouth, 16th, Stoke, 20th, and Bristol City, who are 14th. Brian, that looks, as bad as the last run of fixtures before the international break looked in terms of the teams Blues are playing. I think that looks quite favourable, apart from Leicester. Yeah,
I think Cardiff away will be difficult as well. Blues record down there isn't brilliant. But yeah, looking at those fixtures, I saw Coventry last week. Went over there, and I wasn't very impressed with them, I have to say. Cardiff will be tough. Leicester, Leicester aren't absolutely steamrolling teams like they were, are they? They have this glut of possession, and I think there've been times when they found it quite hard to winkle open defences. So, listen, I can't. Even that said, I still find it unlikely that Blues will go and get anything. Sorry, at St Andrews, isn't it? I still think it'll be a hard game for Blues. Plymouth away, that's hard. Plymouth's home record, for all those struggles away, Plymouth's home record is really quite good. Stoke are having similar wobbles to Blues, actually, and I know our Stoke writer Pete Smith, and been reading his content, and there are discussions happening around Alex Neil. So if Alex Neil is still in the role on Boxing Day, then I suggest Stoke will have picked up some points between now and then. But I certainly look at that as winnable. Wasn't Rotherham winnable? And Bristol City, I think I'm going to be positive here. You look at life through the prism of the Rotherham game and say, I don't know where the next point's coming from. But if Blues play like they did against Ipswich and in periods as they did at Blackburn, I can see them getting a point at Cardiff. Sorry, a point at Coventry, a point at Cardiff, maybe nothing against Leicester, a point at Plymouth, and let's give them 4 points from Stoke and Bristol City. So what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 from 6 games. That's my spin. You?
That's one defeat in 6, isn't it, Brian? That's one defeat in 6.
Yeah, I said I've been positive. Manager of the month material, isn't it? Yeah.
Get the open top buzz ready. I'm similar on Coventry and Cardiff. I reckon Blues might get a couple of points there. Plymouth, I saw they were sold out yesterday. That looks I think they're a good team. I remember watching them against Blues in August, and I thought Blues are very fortunate not to lose that game. I think Plymouth are a good team, but I do think they'll get a win against either Stoke or Bristol City, maybe even both. So I'm going to go 7 or 8 points from those 6 matches, and that is a great improvement on the last 8 matches where Blues have been bottom of the form table in the league with just 5 points. So 7 or 8 points, I think would be an acceptable-ish return and progression. Yeah.
Which leads us to our takes, doesn't it? I've highlighted this one, and you've told me off for messing up your pretty podcast plan. But it was something that engaged me. That there was a discussion going on in my notifications between a few supporters, and this one is from somebody called @Boogler1, and we were discussing about whether Rooney was right to say what he said at the weekend, and he said he does. I don't necessarily support Rooney's stance, but I get it. And then he made reference to change professionals would call this the storming phase. Let's see how it goes. And that got my my little brain thinking, and I can't pretend to be anything like a change professional or even understand what they do particularly. But I did have a quick Google, and there, in terms of managing change, as I understand it, there was this guy called Bruce Tuckman who developed a theory that there were 4 stages of change: forming, storming, norming, and performing. And Boogler's tweet made reference to the storming phase. Now, the storming, my very basic understanding of the storming phase is when frustrations start to bubble up, and when disruption happens, and when there's disagreements, kind of after the honeymoon period is over and everyone's willing to get on and they're all tiptoeing around each other. Once the bumps in the road start to appear, that inevitably leads to conflict, and potentially Boogler's suggestion is that is where we're at the moment, which I think is quite interesting. Do you see anything in that, Alex, at all on the very clumsy definition that I've given you there?
It's very interesting. I mean, I like you, Brian. I can't claim to be a change expert, and I'm definitely not a management expert. It's interesting that that's been picked out, and you can see how it could be applied to Blues in that Rooney, judging by his comments and things that he's been asked to. Let's be honest, he's been asked to come in and completely change the way Birmingham City play, the way Birmingham City think, and the way Birmingham City behaves. As part of the Knighthead revolution to make Birmingham City a Premier League club. And it's about changing a culture, that's been said. So, he's done it himself. He's seen that winning culture. He's seen kind of, the pinnacle of what a football club should look like, and what a football club looks like behind the scenes and also on the field. And maybe he's that press conference, maybe that comment was something he had pre-planned or designed or thought in the moment could, as we spoke about earlier, spark some kind of reaction and kind of make him understand which players are going to be with him and which players aren't going to be with him. The players that are going to, that's how I think it's an interesting idea that. And I suppose, like we said earlier, we'll see in the next month or two, judging by which players he's still picking based on training ground performances, that which ones he thinks he can rely on and which ones he wants to be part of Birmingham City's new future.
Yeah. So the way out of the storm, you're right. The way out of the storming phase is to focus on building trust. Get to know your team members, which presumably that process is already underway. Create a team culture of honesty and transparency. Now, this is absolutely key. It's people not being afraid to speak up, being able to give criticism and take criticism as well, and all with the idea of continually working on better collaboration. Sounds like they'll just need a very good Christmas party, and that everything will be fine, I reckon.
That time is almost upon us, Brian. That time is almost upon us.
Because that's not a risk at all, is it?
No.
Yeah. So
storming.
Yeah. I just want to. Yeah. That. I hope that's not been too dull for people, but it was something that engaged me. So yeah, we probably should move on now.
That was interesting. A couple more takes. One from Mark on Twitter. If there was one thing I expected to improve under Rooney, it was playing against sides like Rotherham. We often struggled to break them down. That hasn't improved. Struggled against Wednesday and barely created anything Saturday while still poor defensively, looking not to lose. I picked this one and I like this one because, the one criticism I always had of John Eustace's Blues was that because it was such a rigid, pragmatic system, it left very little room for creativity. And I think when we spoke so many times about when Blues played this type of team, a team that sat back, although Rotherham didn't sit back as much as we expected them to. I think they pressed quite well at times. And that's probably where the Blues' mistakes defensively came.
I think they were invited to, though, weren't they? Because as I said earlier, I thought the first 5-10 minutes, they seemed totally prepared to sit back and play dead mouse while Blues played with them. No,
100%. And I agree, Mark. I was very disappointed with how little creativity Blues showed. The only real thing that I had going for them in the second half was Dembele. He got a couple of inviting crosses into the box, one of which led to the best chance that Blues had. There was that moment where Dembele did very well down the right-hand side to release Miyoshi, and he released Stansfield, and he kind of fell over himself inside the box. But there was so little, to get excited about from a Blues perspective. And that also played into the atmosphere. The atmosphere was a little bit flat because the performance is flat. And I think Rooney correctly pointed out at the end of that press conference that it's not on the fans to lift the players. The players need to show the fans something. The players need to get the fans. They need to give them something to believe in and something to buy into, because at the moment it's not happening.
I wonder if we're in a world where Blues are more comfortable playing away from home than they are trying to open up sides that sit in at home. Which
lost 7 in a row, Brian.
Okay, maybe not. But I mean, the Blackburn performance, they could quite easily have won, couldn't they? But they were more open, and the counter attack seemed to be more effective at Blackburn. But yeah, you've slapped me down there, so I shall shut up. Fair enough.
One from MW Fitness Pro. The truth hurts. I liked JE. But many times he frustrated me, as in post-match I often felt I was watching a different game. Not sure any of the players needed telling that Saturday was awful. If Wayne Rooney said there were positives from Saturday, he'd have lost me for sure.
Yeah, there was no putting lipstick on his particular pig, was there, on Saturday? So what could Rooney say? Did he need to go two-footed like he did on Steve Vickers when he was a 17-year-old at St Andrews all those years ago? He chose to. Yeah, we've discussed that at length already. But yeah, there was no way he could come out and say we were competitive and there were lots of positives that we're going to take. So yeah, he had to call it as he saw it, and that does give managers an authenticity, doesn't it?
Yeah, I haven't heard the word competitive in 2 months, actually.
There's an easy comeback to that, Alex, to be fair. Let's not go down. Let's not do that.
Last take, Steve Horn. Rooney having another go at certain players, it's not good enough. He blames everybody but himself. If that's how he motivates players, then I can't see anything positive coming from his appointment. It's clear they don't want to play for him. Let's hope the penny drops soon. Brian.
Thanks. Well, yeah, let's hope the penny drops soon. Let's hope the penny drops with the players that Rooney is not prepared to accept what they put on offer against Rotherham. I agree with that section of it. Listen, we've already discussed at length how we feel that this was a management technique or a management strategy designed at getting a response. fans are split on this, aren't they? You know, fans don't. You can either view it as trying to shift the blame, or you can either view it as trying to get a response out of the people that he's managing. I'm prepared to think that it was the latter. You know, if you're massively anti-Wayne Rooney, then you probably think it's the former. What I would say about the pro and anti-Wayne Rooney situation is that, you know, good 80 minutes into Saturday's game, his name was still being sung by the Tilton, wasn't it? And you certainly did not get that impression when you went on social media. So, as I've said this before, I think, but as a journalist, I think all you can do is you take the temperature in the stadium rather than on social media.
Yeah, I think it's a better and probably fairer barometer to judge a manager. I think that clears up all the Wayne Rooney stuff, and doesn't it, Brian? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah. I don't feel I've got any more to wring out of that particular sponge.
Okay, Coventry on Friday night. What are we hoping for?
We're hoping for a scintillating performance and a 3-0 win, aren't we?
Yes. Yeah, it can't be any worse than Coventry last season, to be fair. That was a bit of a painful watch. One of those end of season games where Coventry are cruising towards the playoffs and Blues are cruising towards their summer holidays. So yeah, hopefully better than that, and hopefully better than we've seen recently. Before we finish, I did want to touch on the charity fundraising efforts going on between Blues and their fan base at the moment. Obviously, things aren't great on the field, but off the field, the club are doing a lot of good things. And they announced last week that they are aiming to buy around 11,500 children under the care of the Birmingham Children's Trust a present for this Christmas. Presents, I'm told, range from teddies to water bottles to hats and even blankets for some of those who are going to be leaving the care system imminently. And all of them will include a gift tag which says "From the supporters of Birmingham City." A great thing they're doing in the city. And they're also going to be selling the Blue Noses during the game against Leicester on the 18th of December for £3 a pop. So, yeah, I'm guessing what I'm saying is that if you can do anything to help, obviously times are tough this Christmas and obviously this year with all that's happening in this country. But yeah, there's a nice charity sleep out going on at St Andrews on the Saturday, the 16th as well, from 9 p.m. until 7 a.m. A lot of fans are going to be brave in the cold to raise funds. You know, fan groups like Punjabi Blues are among those fundraising and already raised over £3,000 to date. So a lot of great stuff going on behind the scenes, and supporters working really hard to make sure no child in this city goes without a present this Christmas. Yeah, that's a great one. That's a good way to finish, I think, Brian. Thanks for your time as ever, and hopefully we'll be celebrating a big 3 points against Coventry on Friday to make for a happier and more upbeat podcast next week. Thanks everyone for tuning in.